know if you can hear it, but that's a car alarm sounding. It just stopped. It's funny because we had talked about acceptance and how to not necessarily like something that's going on, but at the very least to try and accept it without judgment. And what one finds out is that it's not the sound or the situation which makes one uncomfortable, but what you think about the situation and the thoughts that you have that are kind of feeding negativity inside, maybe even causing stress, simply because of your thoughts rather than the situation itself. Situations are neutral. On a planet without any humans, everything is neutral, everything is even, everything is level. It's only the human mind which is creating judgments and opinions of what's right and wrong and good and bad. So things in themselves are neutral and without good and without bad. So if you can sort of recognize that in those cases where your first reaction would have been to feel discomfort, which is caused by your own thoughts, you'll find that life becomes a whole lot less stressful. So finding balance, I think, is something we should talk about. And balance comes in different ways, but it's nothing less than actually recognizing your own true place in this vast universe. So you could find balance or perspective, even, you might want to call it, simply just looking at a big picture. And we know how to do this. Sometimes, we have expressions, about, well, that's just one drop in the ocean, things like that. So you already know that this is one planet circling a rather small star in a huge galaxy. And just that thought will sometimes bring a little bit of perspective to a situation. In terms of your own awareness, you have to go through daily life on a daily basis. And one of the realizations that I recently had was that there really is no such thing as self. There's no such thing as you. There's no such thing as me. There really is no quote-unquote person. When we're born, we're given a name, and then we slowly build up various stories surrounding the name. We're called that, we answer to that, and before you know it, that's who we think we are. But if you investigate and you really give it some thought, you'll find that there really is no place inside you where there is a self or a real me or a real person. It's just an illusion. It's a series of thoughts which have built up. It's conditioning, which is a way of dealing with your environment. It's a way that humans deal with their world. It's a way that humans respond to threats. It's a way that humans can collectively agree. It's a way of collectively agreeing on certain behaviors which ultimately lead to peace and safety, even though those things are temporary, but it allows the formation of a society, of groups, of civilization. And if you really just look at history very briefly, you'll see that just names themselves are a rather recent invention. So it wasn't that long ago, I would say just really a few hundred years ago, that people didn't even have last names. They were called by the town they came from. They were called by the trade that they had. So, you meet a person named Joseph Fletcher. A Fletcher was someone who made arrows. So, somewhere in his history, if you look back, you'll see that there was an arrow maker, and that's how his great 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 grandfather got his name. In Iceland, the way they take names is the son takes the name of the grandfather and says the father's last name with the suffix son. So, for example, you might have Peter Johansson, and then when Peter has a child, that child will be called Johan Peterson because he's Peter's son. And then when Johan Peterson has a child, that child will be named Peter Johansson, and so on. So it goes on and on and on and on. Every country has a history of their own customs, their own naming customs. Trades, again, baker, things like this. Fleischer is a name in German, means butcher. So people were also named from places they came from. Berg means mountain. Bergdorf. Okay, so you have von, it means from in German. So you have a variety of ways that people took their names, and it really wasn't that long ago that we came up with this idea, this concept of first and last name. I would just say even as recently as 2 generations ago, people in the United States didn't even have middle names. Many people did not, and that became a fashion to take a middle name. And in Brazil, for example, one takes as their middle name the maiden name of their mother. So just the whole concept of taking names, which is something that we just accept. We don't really think about it very much. You have books and websites, and you pick out baby names, and certain names have different meanings, and it's fun and it's interesting to do that. But again, it's an artificial way, which is based on convention and agreement in various societies. It's an artificial way of labeling a person. And recently, I came to the realization that I am not who I think I am. And who I think I am was a name, 2 words on a name tag. Simply that, nothing more. And with that, I had built up over a period of my whole lifetime a series of stories which I connect and identify with, and I say, well, that's me, that's who I am. But really, that's not who we are. It's all artificial. And suddenly, when one lets go of that, lets go of all the stories, lets go of even the name, and sits, meditates, you could say, within that space, it's very liberating, it's very freeing. So how does one find a balance? That's the question. The temptation is very easy to drift back into saying, well, everything is in the moment, and there's no point in planning anything for the future because there's only now, and there is no past, so it really doesn't matter what I do. what I do, I shouldn't really care about any consequences because there really is no past, there's only now. And one can justify, again, even on scientific terms, that, hey, in a few thousand years, the Earth will be frozen solid or super hot, depending on whether you believe in global cooling or global warming. Or in a million years, maybe this species won't even be here. So what does it really matter what I do? So what I'd like to talk about is finding balance between the cosmic, which is everything, the universe, and everything that extends out infinitely in all directions, and one's daily life. There's a Zen story which sort of points to this, and I'd like to read it right now. And I could tell the story, but I think there are so many little points in it that I don't want to overlook, so I'd rather just read it right now. The name of the story, it's story number 82 in 101 Zen stories. The name of the story is called Nothing Exists. Yamaoka Teshu, as a young student of Zen, visited one master after another. He called upon Dokuan of Shokuku. Desiring to show his attainment, he said, "The mind, Buddha, and sentient beings, after all, do not exist. True nature of phenomena is emptiness. There is no realization, no delusion, no sage, no mediocrity. There is no giving and nothing to be received." Dokuan, who was smoking quietly, said nothing. Suddenly, he whacked Yamaoka with his bamboo pipe. This made the youth quite angry. "If nothing exists," inquired Dokuan, "where did this anger come from?" I love this story because I see on websites and blogs and on Facebook, various groups, they all revert back to, at some point or another, someone at some time in some dialogue will say nothing exists. It's all illusion. In India they call it Maya, which means illusion. And on one level, on a cosmic level, it's true. For an eagle flying over a forest, there is no such thing as future or past. There's only now. There's only the moment. And nothing else exists for that eagle but what that eagle is perceiving at that very moment. So we come into existence from non-existence, and when we die, we go back into non-existence as far as we can perceive. So it's very easy to fall back on one of these cosmic points of view to justify to justify bad behavior, or to ignore and sort of get out of having to seriously analyze a decision or a point of view or a position. And I think there's a real danger there. I saw on one website a young man who suddenly came to realize there was no self, there's no me, there's no person. It's all artificial. It was all conditioning. Now suddenly he sees himself as a being who is in the world, and he doesn't really know if anything matters or what he should do. And he poses this question to the other members of the group. And it was funny, it was amusing to watch members of the group supposedly awakened to the same realization, not really giving him a concrete answer. His question was, what should I do now? Should I do anything? What do I do with my life? I realized that there's just being. There's just this moment. There's just now. There's just bliss. What to be done? So, the answers were all ethereal and somewhat attempting to be spiritual, and not helpful. My reaction was, tell the young man to get a job. And later on, after some dialogue, I ultimately made a comment myself, and I said, what's your background? What do you do? What do you like to do? And maybe, what you need is some career advice. And some people were a little bit taken aback by that. But really, that's what's called for, in my opinion. I would urge someone who has recently awakened or who has found themselves with a sudden cosmic realization and doesn't really understand the meaning of things anymore because the person has relinquished and let go of all of the traditional explanations. I would urge that person to, yes, look within, find what resonates with you in terms of something you'd like to do, but certainly get a job, do work, live daily life. And there are really two ways to converse, two ways to communicate. One way is on the level of form, on the level of language, tools, technology. There's nothing wrong with that. We are now communicating. This is a person speaking to another person, and I could certainly share stories with you, but as long as we both know that these are stories, on a different level, I could say, this is consciousness speaking to itself. This is consciousness speaking to consciousness. And it's all one, and we are the same consciousness. This is a shared consciousness speaking to itself. And that's a realization that you may accept, you may understand, you may grasp totally, that what's happening now is consciousness is simply speaking to itself. That realization is not helpful if you're asking a question about, I'm really getting a lot of stress at my job, what should I do? Or I really have a problem with my boss, I don't really know how to deal with it. The answer isn't to tell your boss, this is consciousness speaking to itself, and anything you say to me is completely meaningless, because in the big scheme of things, none of it's going to matter. That's not something you necessarily want to say at work, because it's not going to help you on the level of existence, on the level of materialism, on the level of form. So what I believe this Zen story teaches us is that on one hand, yes, it is true. Let me just reread what the student was saying. What the student was saying is that everything is illusion. There really is no, the story's title is Nothing Exists. So the true nature of phenomena, that means the things we see, our perceptions, our five senses, the true nature of that is emptiness. So what he's saying is, yes, it is just emptiness. There really is nothing. And out of nothing, we, as humans, with our minds and brains and perceptions and senses, we turn nothing into something through our awareness, through our perceptions. It's we who say, there is a forest, there is a tree. It's the old question, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is there to hear it, will it make a sound? It won't make a sound. It won't even fall. There won't even be a forest. Because existence has to have a perceiver or perception for there to be existence, for there to be what we call a forest. So what the young Yamaoka says is the true nature of phenomena is emptiness. And that's true. Now, since that is true on a cosmic level, and we just sort of touched on it, that doesn't mean that you can answer every situation with that sort of reaction. Yes, it's helpful. It's definitely helpful. And it's helpful to realize our place in the universe when we're in a stressful situation. So, on a cosmic level, nothing exists. It is illusion. And we bring reality to it. But does that help you if you're hungry? Does that help you if you're confused? Does that help you if you're in a dysfunctional relationship or family? Does that help you if you're unemployed and you're looking for work and you're not even sure what kind of work you'd like to do? It doesn't help. So what I like to do is I like to keep things balanced and in perspective. And if I'm giving 100% of my attention to a person on this planet, a human being who is asking for help or who needs advice or with whom I'm conversing, there is not the tendency to just sort of dismiss what that person has to say with some sort of cosmic answer. That's not useful. So I just wanted to share that with you, that balance is indeed very important, and balance comes from both understanding the vastness of the universe and our place in it, and from being able to communicate and give undivided attention to the person that we're with, and being totally present.